Okay, I'm going to be answering a couple questions in different videos today. The first one is, the person writes, I don't know if this will be a difficult question to answer, but here it goes. A video might help others, as I suspect we are not the only ones in this situation. Do you feel that community, fellowship with other believers is very important? I will try to make our story short. We don't attend church for obvious reasons, and we don't attend messianic congregations. Okay, then she talks about some personal information, like where they live and stuff like that. So I'm just going to kind of skip over that part. They live in Bible Belt. And so, in Bible Belt, everyone, the first question they ask is, what church do you go to? And even when she's tried to volunteer, she's, disclosing that they're asking her what church is she a part of, which is absurd. Like, you don't have to belong to a church in order to volunteer your time. And a church is not the church. And even more importantly is that these abominations, these marketplaces that are calling themselves churches, are not God's church. They are actually part of the Antichrist. God said, don't make a marketplace of his Father's house. Jesus flipped over money-changing tables in the temple because they were making a marketplace. Do you think that he was warning us about this? What these are the prostitutes that bore out of the harlot Catholic Church, out of Babylon the Great. And in Revelation 17, it says that Babylon the Great has prostitute daughters. What is a prostitute in Scripture? It is someone who prostitutes themselves to the world. They are not single-minded. They are not in Christ. They are worldly people who belong to the world, calling themselves Christian. And what are these prostitutions? Well, the harlot Catholic Church established the cross. The cross is not in the Bible. The significance of the cross is in the Bible, but the image of the cross is not. Why do you think? Because God said, don't set up an image. And he even specifically said, don't set up an image and bow down and worship it. And what do these people do? They not only bow down to it, they kiss it. They do all kinds of weird, draw it on their foreheads. The image of the cross was set up by the harlot Catholic Church through Constantine the Fake, who claimed after, not before, after he won the battle with Maxentius at the Milvian Bridge, he ended up telling this story about how he had a vision in which Jesus told him, by this sign, you will conquer. Okay, so let me get this straight. Jesus said, by this sign, aka image, you will conquer. Is that right? So the image of the cross did not actually exist prior to Constantine doing that. He's the one who introduced it, and the prostitutes that bore out of Catholicism continue using that image. There are also depictions of this battle in which in which a cross was placed on the shields and the armor and the whatever of the soldiers that fought in that battle. But strangely, on the Constantine Arch, where he has depicted a few false gods, there is no mention of a cross up there. There's not even an image of a cross up there. All right, so it's a hoax. That was a hoax. And if you're in him, he should be convicting you about these things, about so-called pictures of Jesus. I used to have crosses and pictures of Jesus. I'm not judging you about it, but you need to go discern it. If you're hearing from me about this, you need to go ask him. That includes your Jesus fish. That includes your doves. Don't be putting those emojis on anything. These are images. It also includes your statues and pictures of so-called Jesus, hippie Jesus, even though Paul said it's a disgrace for men to have long hair, and everyone depicts Jesus as like some kind of hippie. I mean, I don't care if you're depicting him with short hair or long hair, you shouldn't be setting up an image of him. I was raised in Mormonism, many of you know that, and the Mormons don't use crosses because they say that it celebrates the death of Jesus, but they wouldn't dare say that it's an image, because in every visitor center and temple, they have a massive statue of so-called hippie Jesus. To make no mention of the fact that they observe Christmas and Easter, and of course, during their Feast of Nativity that they got from their harlot mother, the harlot Catholic Church, they set up images in their nativity scenes. What do y'all think you've been doing in doing that? I mean, I did it too. Again, not judging you. But if you hear the truth, if you're hearing this, because no one told me anything, I didn't hear it from a human being. I heard this from God. This is what he ministered to me. You're hearing someone testify to you what they've heard in the presence of God, in the counsel of God. Now you need to go discern it. And so what about Saturday and Sunday? God commands for us to observe his holy days and his new moons and his Sabbaths. Is he then making it a mystery when his Sabbath actually is? It should be in his word, right? His word should be enough to tell us how to obey the things that he's commanded. And it turns out his word is enough. So we shouldn't have to go to people who have not even accepted Christ to tell us when his Sabbath is. People who've not accepted Christ who observe Saturday, that's not in the Bible. They got that also from their harlot mother, the Catholic Church, even though they don't claim, they are not Christian, they don't claim to be Christian, they claim to be Jews. So why are they following in her prostitutions? Because they are part of the prostitutes that bore out of her. They went into captivity to her and they adapted her practices. And it's the same thing that they did with the Greeks when they became Hellenistic Jews and adapted the things that the Greeks were telling them to do, like, do all desecrate God's Sabbath, bring defiled offerings, sacrifice pigs, burn the Torah. God's commands were a burden on them anyway. So if you can't beat them, join them, right? A lot of people turned away at that time as well. They turned to what the Greeks were doing. They did the same thing with Babylon. You can see it today when they talk about, for example, the 7th month being the month of Tishrei. That's a Babylonian name. Why are you using a Babylonian name? I thought y'all claimed to, be preserving God's calendar. Why all of a sudden is God's lunar calendar, do the dates and seasons correlate to each other? That's not accurate on a lunar calendar. Do you guys realize that Islam are better Christians than Christians? Or those calling themselves Christian? They have preserved more of what God established than counterfeit Christianity. A lunar calendar, you cannot have dates correlating on a lunar calendar, with seasons on a lunar calendar. This is the reason that when you study Leviticus 23 and you see that there are 2 festivals that are actually seasonal calendars, people fight here on YouTube. They fight over what date the Festival of Weeks is and what date the offering of first fruits is. You think God wants us to do that? You think he wants us to sit around fighting about what he's commanded or observing what he's commanded? So if he commands for us to obey, he's going to make a way. He's not going to make it a mystery. So if you're actually observing his lunar calendar, you're going to realize that he has season-specific holy days in Leviticus 23. That's the offering of first fruits and the Festival of Weeks. And he has date-specific holy days, and they don't correlate to seasons. And the seasonal holy days don't correlate to dates. If you are observing new moon, the faithful witness in the sky, as he refers to the moon in the Psalms, then you're going to understand when these dates are, or when the season-specific holy days are, based on where you're at in the moon cycle. This isn't new. If we were working the land, we might understand this a little bit better, but there are lots of farmers who farm according to the moon and have historically. All right, I'm kind of going off on something else. That's not the topic of this video, actually. It's in part the topic of the next video, because someone else is trying to discern the moon and the calendar. So I'm going to leave it right there. But what this person is asking about is fellowship and community, and what is it that they are required to do. Now, it doesn't really matter what I feel. It doesn't matter what I personally believe. All that matters is what it says in the word. So I just want to be really clear about that my inclinations are nothing. And if I have an inclination about something that is not in the word, which is very rare, because usually if I have an inclination about something, I'm asking God for a witness in his word as to whether what I'm inclined to believe is true or not. So I want you to remember that Jesus said that those who speak on their own authority do so for their own glory. Those who speak on the authority of the one who sent them, that is a person of truth. That's what I'm trying to emphasize to you right now, that I'm not going to speak to you on my own authority. I'm going to speak to you about what's in the word. The word says, don't forsake the gathering of the saints. of the saints, of the saints, of the saints, of the saints, okay? Not of counterfeit Christianity. So if all you have to assemble with are your family members, they're the only people that you know in this entire world who are actually living this out, which is the truth for me. No one is assembling. No one else is assembling with us. It's the only people I know are my family. And so I assemble with my son-in-law and my daughter and my little grandbabies. That's what we do, because no one else has seen fit to fast and return to God and discern whether they should be assembling with us. So there's no one else to gather with. Now, I'm telling you the reason why I'm only assembling with my family members, because I think it's important that you understand that some people make the decision to just assemble with their family because that's all they're concerned about. They're only concerned about their family. I've proven to you over the last 3.5 years that's not all I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about my duty. I'm concerned about connecting with the body, who are people who obey and observe what God has commanded. The reason I'm assembling with only my family members is because they're the only people I know who actually obey and we're willing to do a fast to discern whether we're actually the body. That should be the responsibility of anyone. No one should be upset that I'm telling you to do that as though we're some sort of cult because we're telling you need to go return to God. God says it in His Word. You need to go discern these things with Him, return to Him, do a fast. One of the other issues that we have had is that depending on what region you live in, we might have different time zones that we have to navigate. Some people have, when we were assembling with people in Europe and in Africa, there were people who were signing in at 4 a.m. or 2 a.m. That becomes really difficult for people to continue to do consistently. And we are not having people come in and then not be consistent about assembling with the body. If you're not consistent, then you're probably not committed. That said, it is a challenge. And so I would encourage you to share what you're learning with other people. Be used to build God's church. And also to see just how bad it is at this point in history, that people really don't care. The person who messaged me, who I'm going to address their message in the next video, has been speaking with one of their friends who I forget the wording that she used, but something about like, they don't have enough energy or investment to actually stick to God's word. So they're just following all of these teachings that are out there in the world. And that's absolutely true. If you don't have it in you, you don't have heart, then that's what you're going to do. This is going to be too hard. And you're going to think things like what people say when they're in relationships. Oh, relationships shouldn't be hard. Yeah, whatever. Relationships are hard. Or the covenant shouldn't be hard. Okay, never mind that the word says it's hard for the righteous to be saved. But you think your covenant should be easy. God's not making it difficult for you. All right. So look, it's better for you to stay away from these prostitute churches, which are part of the Antichrist. You need to come out of Babylon, and Babylon needs to come out of you. It would be better, you need to stay away from them. They are false churches. It's false Christianity. When people are upset about Christians, so-called Christians, and they say, oh, they've, all of our wars have been started in this way, and they've done this, and they've done that. They're not talking about Christianity. They're talking about counterfeit Christianity started by the harlot Catholic Church. And I agree with them wholeheartedly that historically this is what these people have done because they are the Antichrist. Stay away from them. God is not telling you to assemble with them. He's telling you to assemble with the saints. At this point in history, it's very difficult to find the saints. I am only going to be here for a month and a half. I just passed the month and a half mark. That's how long I'm going to be here. So you guys need to find people to assemble with. And you need to start learning how to maintain the purity of God's church. So you need to start learning about what He has talked about in terms of assembling. You don't make Him a marketplace. You serve and you give freely what has freely been given to you. You read 1 Corinthians 14, where Paul is talking about good order in worship, And he says, each of you brothers and sisters have the same covenant. By the way, fine print. Each of you is to bring something to build up the body. Do you guys understand that Christ is the head? There's not like Christ is the head and then the pastor is the small head, like there's two heads on his shoulders or something. Christ is the head, you are the body. That means everybody is on equal playing field. If you are in a position of service, you're actually lower than everyone else. So there should be no mega churches, mega pastors, mega, houses that are tax exempt. None of this should be going on. This is insanity. Rock star pastors, give me a break. That's disgusting. Everyone is supposed to be built during the week where God is building a message for you to build up the church. That's your job. You're living stones building up his house. You're also going to need to learn about exactly what I've done with you. There was a time when we would let people come in because they had a desire to come in and we didn't want to turn anyone away. Guess what? We learned that that was not the right thing to do because God does not have an inclusive church. He has an exclusive church. And he, turns out, holds us accountable for allowing foreigners uncircumcised in heart to enter his sanctuary. So our rule has become, you must fast and return to God first before you come into the body. Otherwise, you're going to bring that spirit of fear and it's going to disrupt things and we're not having it. And we've been through this enough times where people are all about, oh, I've wanted this my whole life, blah, blah, blah. I mean, parable of the sower to the T. I've wanted this my whole life, in tears, even weeping, speaking these words. And then when God starts bringing testing, they're out. They're not able to withstand it. And it's very disruptive to the body. So we started telling people, you need to fast. We're not telling you to do something that's extra to your covenant. This is what you're supposed to do anyway. Go return to God, discern whether you should be here and whether you want to be here, and you're going to be able to commit to being here every Sabbath and every new moon and every holy day. And if there's one thing that you're not able to do, then that's the one thing that's going to take you out. And we're not going to do that because we know what we're doing to stand in our covenant in all of the commands. Now, if you need to start doing this with your family, then do it with your family, but do it with good order in worship. We have a toddler and an infant, okay? So it is, when our family meets, it can be a little bit much with the toddler and the infant, but we do everything we can to make sure that they have something to do and that we are here in the Spirit, by the Spirit, speaking a message. No one is laxing. So, we're talking, my family members and I are talking every single day about what's going on and what we're doing in our faith and everything else. And so there have been times where, my daughter or I have said to each other, I've kind of caught you up on everything that God has been talking to me about. But then our attitude is, okay, so let me go journal, let me go sit with God and see what he wants me to bring to Sabbath. So it's not like we let ourselves off the hook and we're like, oh, I've already told you everything. We don't really need to do this. We hold ourselves accountable. We designate the time, we designate the space, and everyone is accountable to bring a message that will build up the body. And God is really doing amazing things within my family because we have maintained this commitment to him. This is going to be probably a bit of a different structure from what you're used to in counterfeit churches, because what counterfeit churches do is set up the pastor as the one who's doing all the work, and then you pay him to do the work. Like, what is that? So you pay him to excuse yourself from the covenant, and this way you have a situation where you could just sneak in and sneak out, and none will be the wiser. Like, you don't have to connect with anyone. You don't have to be used to build God's church. Like, what is that all about? Another thing that I want to bring up is that as you're reading 1 Corinthians 14, I've done a lot of videos on here about this. All you have to do is type in women on the channel and you're going to see that I have videos that talk about women's role in the church. The statement that women are not allowed to speak in the church is absurd. It is outright absurd, and it is intended by the devil to make you think that women have a separate covenant from what men have, and that men are natural born leaders and so they're supposed to take over this. And so what it does is it sets up the man as being your God, and it absolves women of taking responsibility in their covenant. The word is not saying, Paul was not saying that it is disgraceful for a woman to speak in the church. You need to look at the context of what he's talking about, and you also need to look at the original word and the way that the translators chose to translate that. The word already addresses this, by the way. It says, how can you say we are wise and we have the law when the lying pen of the scribes handled it falsely? So you need to know that there are false interpretations, false translations that are in your copies of the Bible, and you need to be reading the Bible by the Spirit of God. When you are reading that particular passage, it says, it has been translated into, it is disgraceful for a woman to speak in the church. And a couple sentences down, it says, so ask your husbands at home. Well, guess what? The word being translated to woman is the same word that would be translated to wives or single women or widows or blah, blah, blah. So the translators are either stupid, outright stupid, and can't look at a context in order to determine which word they should be selecting, or they're evil and they intended on misleading, because the context is right there, 2 sentences away, and it tells you what you are supposed to translate and understand about that it is disgraceful for a woman, for a wife, because the only option there of all those women, single women, virgins, widows, wives, the only option there of those who have a husband is a wife. So there must be, why would it be disgraceful for a wife to speak in the church? There must be some sort of context that Paul is addressing. Well, it turns out in the OJB it says that it's disgraceful for a wife to be blurting out in the assembly. And the other context that people like to cite is that 1 Timothy verse where he says Eve was the one who sinned. Oh, okay, so why was Adam was also punished? Because he also sinned. They both sinned. Eve sinned first. And what Paul is addressing there is wives who are blurting out over their husbands, and when their husbands are trying to share, and it's creating disorder in worship. Do you know any people like that who do that? Like, you know, their spouse is trying to talk and they're dominating, and it's like real uncomfortable when you're around them. Like, you're super uncomfortable trying to have dinner with them because like the other spouse can't even talk. Well, I'm not saying that it's exactly that situation, but you can imagine that situation, can't you? That they were blurting out over their husbands and that they needed to be quiet. But the word also says that the husbands are supposed to submit to the wives, and the wives are supposed to submit husbands are supposed to submit to the wives are supposed to submit to the husband. You're supposed to be submitted to one another. No one's in control here, okay? So the only one who's in control is Jesus, and everyone's supposed to be submitted to him. We're all a body, just, you know, one body, one head. So as you're determining what you need to be doing in the assembly, how you need to be posturing yourself, I want you to remember, I don't want you to be misled by the way that was translated, because each one of us has the same covenant. Even in the curse, even in what God stated to Adam, he said, you're going to work the land. And then he said to the woman, you're going to bear children. He's letting both of them know that they're going to be working his church. Because later on, he uses these metaphors, working the land. The harvest is ripe, or white, depending on the translation, and the workers are few. You need to get out there and work the land, right? He likens us to land. He says to the woman that you need to bear children, but he also says that through Paul, that it's better for a woman to remain a virgin, to not marry, so that she can be single-minded for God. So is he now punishing the virgin for not bearing children, literally? Of course he's not. Jesus said that there are eunuchs who've been born that way. There are eunuchs who were made that way by man, and then there are those who choose to live as eunuchs, they don't marry, who choose to live as eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom, and those who can accept this should. So he's not punishing the person who has taken this life on and chosen not to get married, but we are to understand that we need to be bearing children and working the land. And he uses that metaphor as well. He uses it a lot in Isaiah with regard to Zion bearing her children, and he also says that your children are going to come to you. They're going to be brought to you. And you're going to say, who bore me these? I was exiled and barren. Who bore me these? So you will bear children, and you need to be focused on what it is that God is going to have you doing in his house to bear those children and to work his land. So in summary, she says, we are completely satisfied with the peace we've been blessed with, but we also like fellowship with others, but won't compromise the false teachings or occult practices disguised as true religion. So my question again is this: what do you do when the church nor the Shabbat congregations fit with what you feel is God's complete teaching, but feel that part of God's teaching is about fellowship with the saints? Okay, that's correct. God is saying to fellowship with the saints, and they didn't have a regular place to meet. I want to remind you, and neither will you. But you can meet online. We meet on, we have met in the past online when we had other people joining us. We never met with any video because it's too distracting, and there's no reason why you need to see by your carnality somebody else's carnality. Do you need to see someone physically in order to meet with them? No, you don't. You can meet by the Spirit. So we would meet on, in an online forum. We used Jitsi, and we met in the Spirit, and we would share what God was building in us. And then we would designate time for fellowship to ask questions or to talk about other issues, towards the end. But we made Sabbath worship very separate, like discreet, so that we knew that we were giving God his what is his right, what's due to him. And this way we weren't getting inside conversations and things like that. So we didn't have like this crosstalk, while someone was sharing. We didn't respond to them. We just let each person share what they were sharing. And then we'd reserve discussion for that fellowship time that we kept separate. So we would pray out, and then we'd open it up for fellowship to talk about anything that we wanted to talk about. So whether you're meeting with your family and you have infants and toddlers and whatever, make sure that you make an intentional effort to make this a designated time in which you are worshiping according to the way that God has said to worship, with good order, and that you give him that respect. Again, I want to encourage you guys to use different language. Don't be talking about the church when you're talking about a church, because these churches are not the church. They are the Antichrist. You need to really get that into your being, so that you are not presenting that stumbling block for other people in the way that you speak. So you might know it in your heart, but if you really know it in your heart, you're not going to use that language. So keep working it into your heart. Refer to them as counterfeit Christianity. And then when people ask you, well, why do you keep referring to them as counterfeit Christian or counterfeit Christianity, or why do you keep saying a church is not the church? Because you're introducing to them what the truth actually is. And if you speak correctly, you're going to have opportunities to clarify for other people what the truth is and to be used by God. Additionally, there are basic things that I would tell you that you need to be very mindful of. If people are observing Saturday and Sunday Sabbath, that is incorrect. You can correct them, but I want you to understand that people are either able to hear the message of God or they're not. And if they're not, you've been taught to dust your feet. You have been commanded to discern the spirit in a person to see whether they are from God. That's your responsibility. It's not a suggestion. It is your responsibility. You need to discern whether people actually have a heart for God or not. And so you will do it by these things. The person that I'm going to do the next video for is telling me it seems like their friend really is lazy, essentially. Like they don't want to have to do the work to really study the word and sit with God's Spirit, and so they're just going to go prostitute themselves to what other people are doing. And I guess what, at the end of the day, expect God to fulfill his to justify them as having fulfilled their covenant? No, they were given an opportunity to know truth, and they didn't love God enough to actually investigate it. They will have believed in vain. It's absurd. So do confront people. You need to confront people. We've confronted people. Someone who was with us a while back, when we were still observing a Saturday Sabbath. God had not brought us into the correct Sabbath yet. This was a Saturday, for Pete's sake. The person was able to take this off on a weekly basis and tell their employer, look, every Saturday I'm going to need to take this day off for religious reasons. You're allowed to do that. It's a little more weird for employers when you go to them and you say, look, God's months don't correlate with Gregorian months, and so these are the dates that I'm going to need off. And you can't even say, like, in the month of June, I'm going to take every Monday off or something like that. Because it could change in the middle of June. That's more difficult. How are you going to be able to do that? Well, this person was meeting with us every Saturday, but she would say things like, I'm going to have to leave a little bit early because I need to go do work. And I finally confronted her and said, what are you doing? What are you doing? God has done so much for you. You've seen his glory. You've seen his miracles. And you can't take a Sabbath off? You're not able to tell your employer that you can't work on this day? What's going on? And she broke up with us by text, which is what cowards do. Even saying that, I know this is a test, but I just can't do it. Okay, well, I mean, that's a very basic thing. So let me tell you some basic things. If people are using the cross, they're using an image. And that image, by the way, is outlined in Ezekiel as the abomination of desolation. It is the image that is used by those who have prostituted themselves and sworn allegiance to the harlot Catholic Church, to the Antichrist kingdom of counterfeit Christianity. If you were to Google what is the cross, or even look at what people use in order to symbolize so-called Christianity, they're always using the cross. But if you were to Google it, it would say this is a symbol of Christianity, aka image of Christianity, right? So does Christianity have an image? No. This is an image of counterfeit Christianity. This is what's going to be embedded in people's hearts by the time that abomination of desolation is set up, 1,290 days after the witnesses have been killed. You need to know that, and you need to stay away from it. You need to know how serious that is. If people are observing Saturday and Sunday Sabbaths, where did they get that from? Because there's no Saturday or Sunday in the Bible. Leviticus 23 talks about counting down. And if you know that the first day of the month on new moon, and you're observing new moon, you know that Amos 8:5 tells you that it is a Sabbath, that it is a day of rest, that people were in a hurry to go back to working and cheating each other, and et cetera, et cetera. But you're supposed to be resting on that day. It's not a 7-day Sabbath. It is a Sabbath. It is a day of rest. So if you know that that's a day of rest on the first day of the month, you know the next 6 days are going to be days of work. And then the 7th day is going to be another day of rest. That's how God taught you in Leviticus 23 to count down to his Sabbaths. He never named the days. So all you have to do is simple Google search. Where do the names of days come from? They come from Rome. That thing that set up the harlot Catholic Church, that began the kingdom of counterfeit Christianity, that established itself in the beautiful land, as it says in Daniel 11. So that's another thing. Tithing is another. Okay? No one should be collecting money. Why are they collecting it? The only reason anyone in the New Testament was collecting money was 1, for the poor, and 2, for God's servants in order to give a gift. So when Paul received that gift, you saw that he acknowledged it as a gift. He didn't acknowledge it as tithing. He didn't say, well, good for you. You've done this thing that you're commanded to do. Why do you think? Paul was collecting money for the poor, and he was given a gift, and he desired that it be to their credit. Why do you think that they were not collecting tithing? Because tithing, if you read the Old Testament, was always associated with sacrifice. So when Jesus sacrificed, tithing no longer was something that was done, was brought. So you need to understand that what these people are imposing on you is a tax to maintain the royal splendor. That's how it's described in Daniel 11, okay? The next thing would be holy days. Are they observing God's holy days, or are they saying things like, oh no, that was already fulfilled, therefore we don't observe it anymore? Because that's stupid. When God established Festival of Tabernacles, for example, it had already been fulfilled. He said you're to do this in remembrance. When he established Passover, he said when your children ask you why you're doing this, this is what you are to tell them. Same thing with tabernacles. So why would we say that the holy days, his appointed times, are not to be observed, especially when he says you are to observe this from generation to generation, wherever you live, as a lasting ordinance? Is that not clear? And why is it that we're observing holidays that pagans pick up? I mean, when the pagans are picking up your practices, you got a problem. And they love them. They love Christmas. They love Easter. When pagans are picking up your practices, you need to know that you are part of the world. So we've abolished God's holy days and taken on the world's holidays, and we call that Christian, and we say that the holy days are for Jews. What is going on there? Okay? Not cool. Another thing is if people are calling people rabbi or messianic rabbi, or they're turning to people they call Jews in order to give them their gospel, this is a problem. Paul said of the Jews of his time that they're loved on account of the patriarchs, but as far as the gospel is concerned, they're enemies for your sake. You do not go to a group of people calling themselves Jews when you know that the word defines a Jew as not being by descent, not descended from Abraham, not necessarily descended from Abraham. Not all who are descended from Abraham are Abraham's children. Not all who are descended from Israel are Israel. Jesus said to a group of Jews who he acknowledged were descended from Abraham, told them that they are not Abraham's children and that they are children of the devil. Okay? So descent is ruled out, which means ethnicity is ruled out. And then Paul says a Jew is not one who is externally circumcised, but internally circumcised through circumcision of the heart. That's a Jew. So why are you going to people who have not accepted Christ and expecting to get any kind of truth, any kind of gospel, and expect that you're going to be brought into truth? They haven't been brought into truth. Why are you receiving from them? So these are basic things. Now, go clean house, guys, because these are such basic things that you should be able to recognize, and yet people want to fight over a basic thing. If you can't hear something basic, you're not going to be able to hear greater things. You know, it's kind of like when Jesus said to Nicodemus, when he was talking to him about rebirth, and Nicodemus said to Jesus, you know, like basically, what are you talking about, or how can this be? How can a man enter his mother's womb and be born another time? And Jesus said, I'm talking about rebirth by the Spirit. Like, if you can't understand this, you're Israel's teacher and you don't understand this. If you can't understand this, how are you going to understand deeper things? How are you going to understand more spiritual things? This is what I'm saying to you right now. If you can't hear the evidence that I'm giving you that these things are false and that they should not be practiced in Christianity, and that no one should be making a marketplace of God's house, if you can't hear that, because I've trusted in God to provide, I've given everything that I have in order to do what I'm doing. I don't take from you. I don't post my Patreon information on here. I'm not doing any of that. I've given everything I have to serve you. Why aren't these people doing that? They have far more people listening to them who could give them a gift here and there and a reasonable living. But see, you know what happens when you do that? When you are getting up every counterfeit Sabbath and you're saying, oh, this is what God commands, and you're trying to guilt people and seduce them into sowing a blessing and, you know, doing their responsibility to basically pay for your lifestyle. You're trying to serve two masters. There's no way that you're not going to start compromising the message in order to receive that income. But it's an entirely different thing when God is the only one who you put your trust in to take care of you. It's a completely different thing. Then it's like you can say whatever you need to say. And then it's a different thing when you know you're going to die for it, because now it's like nothing's holding you back. That's my situation. Okay, I think I answered the question. If you have any other questions about this, please post them in the comments or email me or whatever is easiest for you. I will say that I think that this is an exciting time. It's an exciting thing that that this person is considering how to assemble and has an opportunity to search God's word on what he says about good order and worship, so that you can begin doing this in your family, and then you can be used during the Antichrist reign to bring people in. And hopefully, if God raises you early enough, you might get out of here earlier than that, than being brought all the way to the end. Hopefully. Please discern this message with God.